is okay?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Dominic, we are hearing beeps when people join. Maybe you have to mute them.
Yes, sir.
Maybe we can start, Dominic. And
Yes, sir. Dr. Soumya.
Yes, sir. A warm welcome to one and all present here. I'm very happy to be associated with the Carcinogenesis Foundation and Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences for hosting this program. The program was planned by Professor Gopala Kovali and Professor Pavitran. And the program is planned in such a way that we organized contests for the students. Basically, we conducted two events. One is the essay writing, the other one is the artwork. And we got a very good response from all over India, from various dental and medical institutes. And we are also giving a lot of prizes for the students because we had such a good response. So we really want to encourage them. And the prizes are being sponsored by the organizers. With this, I now request Professor Gopala Kovali, sir, to please give the welcome address.
hello, good morning, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this World No Tobacco Day event being organized by Carcinogenesis Foundation, Ramaya Institute Oral Cancer Center in India, and Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences in Kerala in India. I'm so honored to be partnering with these two organizations led by the team, Dr. Soumya in Bangalore with Ramaya Oral Cancer Institute and Dr. Pavitran in Amrita Institute. This we have planned a while ago, and this is being successful because of the efforts led by Dr. Soumya and team, of course, and support from Dr. Pavitran and advice from him throughout. We have been organizing every month one event in the past few months, starting with World Cancer Awareness Day in February and gallbladder updates and colorectal cancer awareness day, and last month head and neck cancer awareness month was commemorated again with the Oral Cancer Center in Bangalore, led by Dr. Soumya. So the idea is to bring awareness to the non-practitioners and to bring updates to the practitioners. So I think we have good turnout in this meeting. On a Monday evening after 7, having 120 people on screen, I think is good. We have more people waiting to join, I'm sure. I want to especially thank Chris Bostic, who agreed to spend his precious morning with us to give a talk. Chris is a refreshing person for this kind of meetings because he brings tremendous expertise in world tobacco control programs. He being an attorney, he negotiated various things, and his bio will be he will be introduced formally by Dr. Dominic. Chris, special thanks to you for taking time and obliging my request to join. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Soumya.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So, dear colleagues, let's begin this webinar with our plenary from Dr. Chris Bostic. It's indeed my pleasure to introduce him. Dr. Chris Bostic is ASH's Policy Director, that is Action on Smoking and Health. He's been working in global tobacco control since 2001 when he attended the negotiations for the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control as a civil society international law expert. Chris has worked on tobacco policy at the local, state, national and international levels. Prior to joining ASH, he worked with the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids and the American Lung Association, where he helped to develop SLATI, that is State Legislated Actions on Tobacco Issues, which is a national database of tobacco control regulations. He has also served as a clinical instructor at the University of Maryland School of Law. In 2009, Chris led the efforts of an international coalition to redevelop a civil society shadow reporting program for the FCTC, culminating the periodic publication of Tobacco Watch, which tracks global implementation of the treaty. He became Deputy Director of ASH in 2012, and in his current position, Chris oversees the development and implementation of ASH's programs, including human rights, tobacco endgame, and legal liability. He also serves as a member of the Board of Directors of the Human Rights Tobacco Control Network and is a founding member of the Tobacco Control Legal Consortium. Chris holds a Juris Doctorate from the Washington College of Law and a Master of Science in Foreign Service from Georgetown University. I welcome him to this webinar and request him to present his plenary, Global Status and Challenges on the War Against Tobacco. Welcome, Dr. Chris. You can now share your screen.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Augustine, and thank you to the other organizers. It's a real honor to be here to talk to you this morning or this evening, I guess, for most of you. As Dr. Augustine said, I'm the policy director for Action on Smoking and Health, which is based in the United States. And so I'm just trying to get my screen on here. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Yes, Dr.
So it could be slightly confusing for some people. There are many ASHs around the world, and they're not affiliated. It's just a very good acronym. And so I think there are 13 around where we work with them, of course. All the ASHs are friends, but we're not legally connected to each other. So let me dive right in. My point here today is to talk about where we are in tobacco control in the world in terms of policy and effectiveness and where we can go next. So as you all know, tobacco is still the world's leading cause of preventable death in spite of all of our efforts. There are 1.3 billion tobacco users in the world today. The reason I have some things crossed out there is that the 1.1 billion, that was the number when we started negotiations for the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control over 20 years ago. The 1.2 billion was the estimate in 2010. So unfortunately, the number is continuing to go up, mainly because of population increase in the world. But we obviously have a lot more work to do. We also have over 8 million deaths a year still attributed to tobacco across the globe. And again, that number has gone up since we started negotiating the FCTC. And perhaps most dire of all, we have 1.2 million deaths from secondhand smoke. And that's actually double the number that was estimated 20 years ago. This may be partially because of better data gathering, but still a very sobering number. So we've missed a few of our targets. When the FCTC negotiations were concluded, one of the things that the World Health Assembly did was set a 10-year goal to have a 10% reduction of total tobacco use or prevalence rate in half of the member states by 2013. That goal was not reached. There were a few places that they got there, but not half of the member states. And in 2010, the UN concluded its negotiations on the Non-Communicable Disease Global Action Plan. And they set a target, a 15-year target of getting a 30% relative reduction in prevalence by 2025, so just 4 years from now. We don't know if we're going to reach that target, but it does not look like it. The curves in most places are not bending down fast enough to achieve that 30% reduction. A little bit about the FCTC, as I'm sure you all know. It is one of the most widely followed treaties in the world. There are now 181 national parties, plus the European Commission has signed on as a regional organization. The countries that have ratified the FCTC represent more than 90% of global population. And the major holdouts are still the United States, Indonesia, and Argentina. But there are very few countries that have not ratified, which is great news. So just some of the milestones. The FCTC was negotiated between 2000 and 2003. There were 6 intergovernmental negotiating sessions to do that. When they were finished negotiating, they took the text to the World Health Assembly in 2003, where it was unanimously adopted, including by countries like the United States and Indonesia. And then it entered into force in early 2005. This was after the 40th party had ratified the treaty. So it's been in force now for more than 15 years. So there was a 2018 Global Progress Report put out by the World Health Organization on tobacco control. It's mixed in terms of the outcomes from that. If you look at article by article in terms of the substantive obligations under the FCTC that countries took on, the implementation rate ranges from 13% to 88%, which is not really great. There are a few bright spots, like countries that raising taxes include 90% of parties, which is fantastic. Most countries ban sales to minors, which unbelievably enough was not true when the treaty was negotiated. And of course, a large number of countries have now included tobacco in their long-term national plans. And I'm sorry, this slide is a bit small, but this is taken directly from the Global Progress Report. This is the article by article in terms of the substantive articles and how it has been implemented. And it shows the changes from the 2016 report to the 2018 report. Due to COVID, there was no 2020 reports. So this is the most recent data that we have. This looks positive. In most cases, there's greater implementation of the treaty over those 2 years. But we should keep in mind that this is self-reported. This is what the countries themselves say to the WHO, and there is no mechanism to double check to see if it's actually being done. So countries tend to brag a bit about what they're doing. So we have to take this with a bit of a grain of salt. This figure is a little bit more reliable because it's put out by the World Bank, and this just shows prevalence amongst various income groups over the 12-year period from 2005 to 2017. And it's good. The slope is down in every case. The reason that the high-income countries go down faster than the others, I believe, is because the World Bank includes the United States in its data, but the World Health Organization does not, because they're not a party to the treaty. And fortunately, in my country, we have seen a strong dip in prevalence. So some of the real bright spots in global tobacco control implementation. I'll start with plain packaging, which was something not even envisioned by the original negotiators of the FCTC. And I'm sure you all remember when Australia stuck its neck out, I believe in 2011, and passed plain packaging and were sued over and over again by the tobacco industry. And they won every lawsuit, and it was implemented. And since then, another 16 countries have implemented the plain packaging as of last October. And I'm sorry, that source down below should say October 20th of 2020. Smoke-free air is another bright spot, and this one is particularly appealing because it almost did not make it into the treaty. During the treaty negotiations, smoke-free air was such a radical concept that even many civil society groups didn't think it should be in the treaty. And it was a few groups that pushed hard to at least get something in the treaty, and it became Article 8. And just amazingly enough, the biggest opponent of smoke-free air at the negotiations was the delegation from Ireland, and that was in 2003. And then in 2004, Ireland became the first country to ban tobacco smoking in all workplaces. And since then, it has skyrocketed, and many people are protected from secondhand smoke around the world now. And then the third is marketing. As you know, Article 13, which of the FCTC obligates parties to ban all forms of marketing of tobacco products, and that has taken off wildly. And especially if you see the red line there is the FCTC parties. There's been a real spike in just the last few years, to the point now where about half of the population of the world does not see tobacco marketing, or at least should not see it. Some of the challenges that we have still, though, the worst, as I believe, is Article 5.3 of the FCTC, and this is on industry interference. The industry has redoubled its efforts since the FCTC came into force to try to prevent or at least delay tobacco control policies around the world. One of the worst instances of this is that the industry is appearing more and more on official delegations to the Conference of the Parties, which is held every 2 years as sort of an update session, negotiating session for the FCTC. They are trying to do something about this, but of course, as sovereign nations, there's no one that can tell them they can't have industry delegates on the delegations, and it's been very difficult to move forward in the FCTC since then, since the delegations were infiltrated by the tobacco industry. And so a lot of folks that have been involved in FCTC negotiations for 15 or 20 years believe that the way forward is not going to be through the FCTC formal policies or formal mechanisms, but through other international cooperation. The other thing about the FCTC is, given when it was negotiated, it represents the best practices from the 20th century. And they are best practices. If every country implemented the FCTC fully, we would see a lot of progress. But as a framework convention, it was meant to move forward. It was meant that the Conference of the Parties was designed to allow for the treaty to be altered or updated so that parties could have advantage of new best practices. But other than the protocol on the International Trade Protocol on smuggling, there's been no new obligations. And in fact, that's of course a separate protocol and doesn't apply to FCTC parties unless they separately ratify it. And so as a framework convention in that way, it has failed to live up to its expectations. The other problem with the FCTC, and this is related to its 20th century best practices, is that almost all of the obligations are related to demand reduction. They're focused on convincing children to never use tobacco and on adults to quit. And those demand reduction measures are absolutely vital, but it's only half of the challenge. And supply is very much overlooked in the FCTC. There are only 2 articles that talk about supply. One is on international trade and international smuggling, and the other is on sales to and by minors at the retail level. And then, of course, cessation. There is a very strong cessation Article 14 article in the FCTC, but it has been largely overlooked over the last 20 years. And fortunately, that is starting to change. And I think that's evident by the fact that we're here today on World No Tobacco Day, and the theme is cessation. And this is something that a lot of groups feel is the next frontier in dealing with the tobacco epidemic. Yes, we should be stopping children from starting, but since most people that use tobacco as adults want to quit, we should help them in every way that we can. And then, of course, perhaps the biggest challenge we face within our community is the split over what to do with new products like e-cigarettes, like heat-not-burn products. As you know, there's quite a schism from one side to the other. I think most folks in tobacco control are somewhere in the middle, and they're willing to move forward on products we know are bad for us, like cigarettes, and deal with other products separately. But there are others who feel like we should embrace e-cigarettes as a way to help on cessation, and others that feel that we can't allow a new addictive epidemic to take form. So opportunities moving forward. One article that was not talked about for many years, but in the last 2 years has become sort of a new frontier for a lot of groups is Article 2 of the FCTC, and specifically Article 2.1, which calls on governments to go beyond the individual measures in the FCTC. And this was put in there to make sure that the FCTC was seen as a floor as opposed to a ceiling. so that the minimum obligations are in there, but they shouldn't feel like once they've done that, they can't go any further, and they should go further. So one way we can implement Article 2.1 is to look at the global tobacco epidemic as a human rights issue. And the human right to health is well documented in human rights norms around the world. It first came into being in the Constitution of the World Health Organization, which is the bottom text there. And then it was reiterated in the International Convention, Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And the language used in that treaty is the language that is used now as a general way to talk about the right to health, which is the right to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. That word attainable is important because, of course, not every government is in the same position to be able to provide health for their citizens. So the right to health doesn't mean that everyone gets an MRI machine in their house, because that's just impossible. But the idea is to give the highest attainable standard and to continue to raise that standard as you move forward. So these were incorporated into the FCTC itself. This is language from the Chapeau that recognizes those same two treaties, the treaty and Constitution. So they put it directly into the text of the FCTC. The original framers did intend for there to be strong connections between human rights and the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And they actually went further in the treaty and recalled two other treaties, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, and then the Convention on the Rights of the Child, or CRC, which also both include right to health in their texts. So this is going to be a little bit legalese for folks, but I think it's important to get an understanding of how the human rights work in the world. So basically, this is the obligations for governments for human rights. So all of these duty bearers that you see at the bottom are governments. And their first obligation, and first and foremost, is to respect human rights. And by that, we mean governments should not violate the human rights of their own citizens. So that seems obvious, but it's still a problem in many countries, as you know. The second obligation is to protect their people from third parties violating their human rights. And this can be anything from pirates to corporations to anything. And then they have a duty to fulfill. And this is related to the attainable standard of public health. They're supposed to always be looking for ways to improve the human rights of their citizenry. So a few years ago, the United Nations system began chatting about how international business fits into the human rights concept. And they developed what are called the Ruggie principles, or the global best practices. And it's slightly different from the previous slide. The protect is still about governments. Governments have this duty to protect their citizens from human rights abuses by third parties. But now the respect element is applied to corporations. So the duty bearer here is corporations, and they have a responsibility to protect human rights. So when you take the tobacco epidemic and the actions of the tobacco industry, and you sort of plug them in to the human rights norms of the world, you come out with a couple of conclusions. And this is the first one. Well, we're going to start with the just understanding that we already know that the tobacco industry has failed in its duty to respect human rights. Just by selling its products, it's killing people every day. So we need to bounce back to what governments have to do in response to that third party violating human rights. And the first is to protect. And this is back to the governments or the duty bearer here. And in order to protect them, they've got to stop the industry from doing what it's doing that's harming them. And in this case, that's the sale of tobacco products. It is obviously there are other ways that the tobacco industry violates human rights. There are child labor abuses. There's environmental aspects to tobacco farming. There are violations of human rights. But in general, just selling their products, which they know will kill people when used as intended, is a violation of human rights. And governments have a duty to stop that. And the only way to stop it is to worry about the supply of tobacco products. A lot of people call this endgame. Specifically now, there is a global movement called Project Sunset, which aims to phase out the sale of commercial tobacco products. And a number of governments are moving forward on that, and I'll chat about that in a moment. The other conclusion that we come to when we analyze the tobacco epidemic through the human rights lens is that given that the tobacco industry does not respect human rights, governments have to put in place remedies to bring justice to those folks who have been harmed. Now, there's been a lot of civil litigation around the world with various levels of success to hold the tobacco industry accountable in that way, mainly for monetary damages. But the one thing that we haven't done yet in the world is use criminal liability. And criminal liability is included in the FCTC. It's in Article 19 under liability, but no government has yet brought a case against a tobacco industry executive for basically for murder. There was a case in the Netherlands a few years ago that was brought under civil code, but they were arguing for criminal liability. And that case was basically punted to the legislature. The court said it was not something it could rule on. And there is a case pending in France right now against the tobacco industry, but we're looking for other ways that we can hold tobacco industry executives individually accountable, which of course would have a tremendous impact on their ability to attract talent at their highest levels. So the recognition that multinational corporations are having a larger and larger role to play in the world is reflected in a new negotiation. They're trying to complete a treaty on transnational corporations and human rights. And this has been going on for several years. To be honest, it's not going well. There are a lot of governments that depend heavily on the income from multinational corporations being housed in their jurisdictions, and so are slowing this down. We shouldn't rely on this, but we should move forward just on the human rights norms rather than depending on it being incorporated into a treaty. And I just wanted to tell a brief story on this. The Danish Institute for Human Rights is a quasi-governmental group in Denmark. Most governments have something like this, some sort of Institute for Human Rights that's part government but part private sort of think tank. And about 4 years ago, we were informed by some allies in Germany that the Danish Institute for Human Rights had entered voluntarily into an agreement with Philip Morris International. And the idea was PMI wanted the Danish Institute to examine their supply chain for human rights violations. Basically, they wanted to whitewash their image. And so they asked the Danes to look at one particular aspect of their business, which they knew they had cleaned up, so that they could come back and give them a good report card. So we reached out to the Institute and informed them, because they were partially supported by the government, that Article 5.3 of the Framework Convention applies to them, and they're not allowed to enter into voluntary interactions with the tobacco industry. So to their credit, as soon as they learned that, within an hour, they canceled their agreement with Philip Morris. And then we went back to them and we thanked them for doing that. And we asked, could you just make a statement on your website so that all the other institutes in the world that are similar to yours will be on notice that they're not supposed to do this and we won't have to do this again. And they came back with text that included this, that basically says that there is no way that you can reconcile tobacco production and marketing with the human right to health, and that the only way for Philip Morris International to live up to its human rights obligations is to go out of business tomorrow. So that was very powerful. Certainly PMI could not have been happy with the result of their interactions with the Danish Institute. This became incorporated into an important document called the Cape Town Declaration on Human Rights and a Tobacco-Free World. And I'm sure some of you were there and remember this. This was at the 2018 World Conference on Tobacco or Health. And this document was adopted unanimously by the conference. And its very first paragraph, we agree that the manufacture, marketing, and sale of tobacco are incompatible with the human right to health. And now that we've all agreed that, we need to put that into action, I think. This was followed up a year later in 2019 by a global forum on human rights and a tobacco-free world. It was held in Bucharest at the Presidential Palace. And the concept here was to bring in some high-level people to talk about tobacco control and to talk about getting rid of the tobacco as a product on the market. And it included some higher-up folks from the European Union's Ministry of Health. There were a few senior human rights experts there, and it really moved the ball forward. And of course, it adopted its own document on very similar to the Cape Town Declaration. So there has been some movement in this area. It's no longer completely theoretical that we can eventually just end the sale of these products. The first was Balanga City in the Philippines. They passed what's called a tobacco-free generation bill. And for those not familiar, tobacco-free generation basically sets a birth date after which you can never buy tobacco. So in their case, they said anyone born on January 1st, 2000 or later can never be sold tobacco. And so it'll basically eventually push out tobacco sales as people age. Unfortunately, they were sued and they lost. And so that the tobacco-free generation concept has not been put into play there in Balanga City. It's currently under appeal. More recently, Beverly Hills and Manhattan Beach, which are two cities near Los Angeles in California, United States, have implemented, just as of January 1st, a complete ban on the sales of all tobacco products. So they've been going for about 5 months now, and they have not had any difficulties. There's been no lawsuits from the tobacco industry, and apparently no problem with compliance. Now, these are two small cities. Beverly Hills, I believe, only had 28 retailers in the city. So it's not going to drive down prevalence in California anytime soon, but it is great for symbolism because now we have a proof of concept. It's no longer maybe we can do this. We know we can do this. California itself, as a state, has decided that it wants to do this statewide, and so the state government has put some money behind getting all of California to this status by 2035. And they're going to go city by city and see if they can get it done that way because things are very difficult at the state level there. So that will be amazing. California is the 5th largest economy on earth, and if tobacco becomes illegal to sell there, that will have a real impact on the tobacco industry. Then there are a few other small cities in the United States that have taken some action. Brookline, Massachusetts, last year also passed a tobacco-free generation bill. It is currently in the office of the Attorney General of Massachusetts for approval. And this is from Brookline's own constitution says that they have to have the approval of the Attorney General. So we're expecting a response from the Attorney General in July, and we're hoping it will be a positive one. And if it is, it will go immediately into effect in Brookline. And they also set January 1st, 2000 as a date. So there will already be people who have turned 21 this year who will then not be able to buy tobacco in Brookline. Then in Bloomfield and Dolgeville, Bloomfield is in Minnesota and Dolgeville is in New York State. They have both passed a retail licensing scheme that will eventually phase out sales. They've basically said, we're never going to give out a new license for tobacco retailing. So we can't have any new tobacco retailers ever. And the licenses that currently exist cannot be transferred. And so as individual store owners retire or move, they will not be able to give that license to someone else, even their own children. And so eventually they will have no more retailers in those two cities. And then there's been some exciting movement in other places. The Netherlands has announced a plan to drastically reduce the number of retailers in their country over the next 2 years, and to eventually get rid of them entirely. But the plan doesn't go far enough to get to 0 right now. But the idea is to get it down to 10 or 20% of what it is now by 2023, I believe. And then 2 months ago, a Spanish coalition of medical groups and advocates published a declaration on tobacco in their country, calling on the Spanish government to drive prevalence of tobacco use down to 5% or lower by 2030. This is a very ambitious plan because the current prevalence rate in Spain is about 22%. So they haven't gone very far yet to get there. Just for comparison, the prevalence rate in Beverly Hills was less than 6% when they got rid of sales. And the Spanish declaration does include a full plan, including again the tobacco-free generation concept that they will implement, and they're aiming for a different date. They're aiming for January 1st of 2007. And then on World Cancer Day, which was mentioned in the introduction, there were a couple of very positive developments in Europe. First, the European Commission announced that it had a new plan to drastically reduce cancer by 2040 in the European Union, and they talked about tobacco, and they said that the only way to do this is to basically get rid of tobacco, have a tobacco-free generation in the European Union. And on the same day, President Macron of France launched his own national anti-cancer effort, and again, he realized and said out loud that the only way they can achieve it is to get rid of tobacco. And so those are governments that have not put a lot of attention on tobacco in the past that are now seeing it. And then, of course, there are the so-called aspire countries. And I'm sure you've heard of these. These are countries that have set very aggressive prevalence rate goals for certain years. So the first one was New Zealand, for example, and they want to get to 5% by 2025. But there's many others. Finland is going for 2% by 2040. There's Canada, Ireland, Scotland, England, Sweden, Finland, Slovenia, and a few others that have also set ambitious goals. And very interesting, just in the last month, the New Zealand Ministry of Health has put forward a proposed plan to get them to 2025 because they realize that they're not going to make it. You know, they started this in 2015 in the 10-year plan, and halfway through, their scientists looked at the curves and realized they can't get to 5% in 5 more years using traditional tobacco control policies, because they've done everything that you can do for the FCTC. They have high taxes, they have complete smoke-free air, they have age limits, they have plain packaging. So there wasn't many more places they could go from a demand side. And so they have suggested some very radical, at least to some ears, proposals, including banning the sale of filters. So cigarettes can't have filters anymore. The tobacco-free generation concept, all restricting licensing to get it down to zero, and even reducing nicotine in cigarettes to non-addictive levels. So they're currently finishing up a comment period today, and after that they will look at the comments and come back with a rejiggered plan. They can hopefully pass through Parliament and become implemented hopefully later this year. And then just last week, a week ago today, May 24th, a letter was released that called for governments around the world to do what New Zealand is doing, which is to at least plan for phasing out the sale of combustible tobacco products. And that got quite a bit of news. We had 148 organizations.
Chris? Hello?
I think there must be some internet issue, sir.
Yeah, okay. We'll wait.
Yes, sir, we can wait. I think he must be rejoining, sir. So you need to unmute, sir.
Dominic, can you chat with him if he's there? I do not know.
Yes, sir. I'm trying to contact him.
Okay. I think there is a static somewhere, I think.
Can you hear me again?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Dr. Chris. Welcome back.
I'm sorry, I got kicked out of Teams and I don't know when it happened. So I'm not sure what the last thing you heard from me on, but I was nearly done anyway.
Yeah.
Should I show my last slide? And
Yes.
okay. And you can see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, it's not cooperating, so I'll just leave it in this mode. It's the last slide anyway. So this is just moving forward. We have a lot to do still, obviously, in tobacco control. The war is far from over, but we do have some places that we can look to expand our victories. The first is we need full FCTC implementation. The FCTC is still the best standard that we have for fighting the tobacco epidemic. One of the problems that we've had with the FCTC is that parties see it as a menu as opposed to a recipe. And so they'll pick one, they'll do smoke-free air, or they'll do plain packaging, or they'll do one other thing. But it was meant to be done incomprehensibly so that everything moves forward. We need to get more countries to take it seriously in that way. We also need to implement the protocol on illicit trade. Illicit trade is a huge problem in the world, and it's mostly done by the tobacco industry itself. So we need to get on that. We need to keep the industry out of FCTC meetings and away from national policy making, and that's, as I said earlier, a huge problem. We need to use human rights to advance tobacco control policy and tobacco control rhetoric. It's a way to bring in a whole new community of folks on our side. And then we need to have countries make plans to phase out commercial sales. For so long, countries have just said someday. You know, by the end of the century, the tobacco epidemic will be ended, or by 2050 it'll be ended. We need more realistic dates, sooner dates, and we need plans to get us there. And that is my presentation. I'm very sorry about the technical problems. I'm happy to take some questions.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Dr. Chris. So we will have the questions posted in the chat box, and towards the end of the session, take it up.
Dominic, it's a good idea. What we will do, we'll request people to send questions to Soumya, and she will forward it to me and Chris. We will route it that way, okay, in the interest of time, because Chris has to leave now in a few minutes after this. Okay, yes. Chris, that's okay? All right.
Yes, sure.
So thank you, Dr.
Chris.
Thank you, Dr. Chris Bostic, for this enriching session. I'm sure your presentation and thoughts concerning policy matters have ignited the minds of several policymakers present in this webinar who wish to implement such programs in their respective universities. Also, your noble work should be a blueprint for all those who wish to pursue this domain. So kindly accept the certificate of appreciation. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you very much.
Chris, from my side, thank you. From my side, and Dr. Pavitran will tell. I think we can translate this into the Indian context, hopefully, and I can chat with you later on. I think Indian situation is a little bit different, tricky. So we could talk, probably, we could write up something together. Thank you.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you so much.
So now we'll move on to the next talk of this webinar, which will be by Dr. Soumya SV. So a brief introduction to Dr. Soumya SV. She is currently heading the Department of Oral Pathology and Microbiology at the Faculty of Dental Sciences, Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences. She is also the head of the Oral Cancer Research Center. She has over 10 years of experience in academics and research and is currently pursuing her PhD. She has over 50 publications to her credit in indexed and peer-reviewed journals. Her expertise includes histopathology, cytopathology, diagnosis of oral precancer and cancer, metastatic risk assessment of oral cancer as well. Her areas of interest include oral oncology, diagnostic pathology, forensic odontology, and oral potentially malignant disorders. She is also a life member of the Indian Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Pathology. I welcome her to now present her lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Dominic. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, it's visible, ma'am.
Thank you, sir, for giving me an opportunity. I thank the Carcinogenesis Foundation and Professor Pavitran for giving me an opportunity to speak at this forum. To begin with my presentation, I would like to quote this famous saying by Warren Buffett, who says, "Chains of habit are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken." So the chains that we put around ourselves will have enormous consequences through our life. So I think this holds good for today's topic. And the topic for today's presentation is effects of tobacco on health. These are the contents. I would be giving a brief overview of the epidemiology, which already Sir has spoken, but briefly about it. The various forms of tobacco use and its effects on general and oral health. Tobacco is an agricultural product of the leaves of plants in the genus Nicotiana. Archaeological studies suggest that use of tobacco started in 1st century BC by the Maya people of Central America, who used tobacco leaves for smoking during their cultural and religious ceremonies. Later, the Portuguese and Spanish sailors spread different forms of tobacco around the world. Tobacco is also adopted by many countries as cash crops by the farmers and government treasuries. And the major tobacco growing and consuming countries are the China, USA, Russia, India, and Brazil. Now, moving on to the global scenario on the epidemiology of tobacco use, which Sir has already spoken. We know that tobacco use is a leading preventable and behavioral risk factor of mortality and morbidity all over the world, killing more than 7 million people. It is the only legally available and commonly used substance that will kill 1/3 to 1/2 the people who use it. And the annual death toll could rise to more than 8 million by the year 2030. And we see that more than 80% of the deaths are predicted to occur in the developing world. If you look at the data pertaining to India, the prevalence of smoking and smokeless tobacco use are high, accounting to 48.6%. And the high prevalence is reported among the school-going adolescents aged 13 to 15 years. And majority of the smoking-related deaths in India occur between the age of 15 to 59 years. So if we look at the prevalence of the current tobacco smoking, according to the Global Adult Tobacco Survey Fact Sheet of India 2016-17, we find that the prevalence is high in Mizoram, around 34.4%, and it is least in Maharashtra, showing a 3.8% prevalence. And when we look at the data pertaining to smokeless tobacco use in the Indian states, we see that Tripura shows is 48.5%, and the least is by Himachal Pradesh, accounting to 3.1%. So every 10th adult in India uses smoked form of tobacco, which accounts to 10.7%, and it is found that in the males it is 19% as compared to females, which is 2%. Likewise, every 5th adult in India uses smokeless tobacco form, which accounts to 21.4%, and in the males it is predominant, 29.6%, and the prevalence in females is found to be 12.8%. So we all know there are two forms of smoked tobacco and smokeless tobacco. So cigarettes are the most prevalent forms of its use, and cigars are also used now widespreadly, especially among the adolescents of both sexes in the US, and they have high nicotine content than cigarettes do and can deliver nicotine through both the smoke as well as the tobacco wrapper. Cheroots are again small cigars which are made of heavy bodied tobacco. Bidi smoking is a very popular form of tobacco which is used in the South Asian population, and more than 15% of the population uses this bidis. And Kretex are again gaining popularity among young people, especially in adolescents. And pipe smoking is one of the oldest methods of tobacco use. And water pipes use special receptacles through which smoke has to pass, especially superficially, so as to it can reduce the harmful effects. and hookah is an Indian water pipe. So if we look at the statistics of smoked tobacco, we can see that the mean number of cigarettes smoked by a daily smoker is found to be around 6.8, and that of BDs is found to be 15.1. And there is, when we compare the data of the Global Adult Tobacco Survey of India, which was conducted in 2009 and 10, that is GATS 1, and that with the GATS 2, which was conducted in 2016-17, we can find a significant reduction from 14% to 10.7%. And this reduction in the prevalence is noted in cigarettes by 1.7%, BD by 1.5%, cigar by 0.3%, and hookah by 0.2%. So in the we have various chemicals which are present in the tobacco smoke, and more than 60 carcinogens are found according to the International Agency for Research on Cancer. And to name a few, they are the polynuclear aromatic hydrocarbons, the nitrosamines, and the carcinogens are mainly the N-nitrosamines, which are the main components of the tobacco-specific N-nitrosamines. So moving on to the smokeless form of tobacco, this is the greatest burden in the Southeast Asian region, accounting to 89%. And it is documented in more than 120 countries, and of the 346 million global users, India alone has 152.4 million men and 80.8 million smokeless tobacco consumers. And smokeless tobacco use exceeds cigarette smoking among both men and women. And as we have seen the data in smoked form, here also we found a significant reduction in the smokeless tobacco use from 25.9% in GATS 1 to 21.4% in GATS 2. So this is over a 7-year period. And the most common forms which have shown reduction are the betel quid with tobacco and khaini by 0.4% and gutkha by 1.4%. Now, I found this very recent article which is published in PLOS One, that is in February 2021, where they have tried to assess what are the factors that are responsible for this declining trend of smoking and smokeless tobacco in India. And the main reasons what they quote are, it is mainly because of the propensity component, because there is a difference in the residential type and the occupation, especially the self-employed people and those who are homemakers. In these, they have found there is a reduction in the tobacco use. Also, it also depends on the political, legal, and geographical factors. That is the extent to which each state is able to implement the anti-tobacco measures has a pivotal role on the cessation or decline in the percentage of users. And it also depends on the age of the respondent. So just to know what are the various smokeless tobacco forms that are available, we have the kivam, betel quid, or the pan, jarda, and gutkha, which is available in the Southeast Asian countries. And in the US, the most common forms are the dry and the moist snuff, caffeinated snuff, and plug and twist, and also some dissolvables. And most commonly, what is used in India is the red tooth powder and mawa. These smokeless tobacco forms have got various ingredients in them so that they become more attractive and they can be used by the public. Now, what we need to know is the addictive component which is there in the tobacco products are mainly because of the presence of nicotine. Now, if the nicotine has to show its effect, it has to exist in the free form. And this free nicotine is the one which gets increased when we add alkaline modifiers. So these alkaline modifiers actually increase the pH and will cause release of this free nicotine, which will easily pass through the cell membranes and cause its adverse health effects. So based on the alkaline modifiers, there are 4 categories of tobacco. Tobacco with little or no alkaline modifiers are categorized as first type. The examples are mishri and red tooth powder. Then the category 2 involves various alkaline modifiers which are mixed with tobacco. The most commonly used in India is the khaini. And tobacco with alkaline modifiers and areca nut. Areca nut is now considered as a type 1 carcinogen, and the most common form is the gutka and mainpuri and mawa, which is used in Pakistan. And there are also products which are available where plant stimulants are added, like toca bean and coumarin. Now this will help in the toxicity of these chemicals or products, and they are categorized as category 4. Moving on to the next section, that is the various general health effects of tobacco and smoking specifically. So mainly it causes cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, and neoplastic lesions, mainly the cancers of the lungs and the oral cavity. And this accounts to 75% of the deaths in these patients. And these patients are also prone for stroke, diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, macular degeneration of the eye, orofacial clefts, and also ectopic pregnancy. Now, this is a very interesting article which I came across because it is a systematic review which has been done from over a long period of time, from 1990 to 2015, where they have tried to assess the smoking prevalence and attributable disease burden in 195 countries and territories. And here they have found again that the cardiovascular diseases, cancers, and chronic respiratory diseases are the main ones which will lead to the severity of tobacco smoking. So we would like to know a little bit about what is exactly the pathophysiology of the cigarette smoking. So smoke usually contains the mainstream smoke, which actually contributes to the minor component, whereas the side stream smoke contributes to 85% of the smoke that is generated. And whether it is active or the passive smoke, it causes release of components of which get into the lung. It gets deposited in the lung, leads to activation of the endogenous sources of free radicals, and there is also activation of the inflammatory cells. So these together will lead to increase in the oxidative stress and decrease in the nitric oxide generation or bioavailability. So this in turn will cause vasomotor dysfunction, increased prothrombotic and decreased fibrinolytic factors. It also causes leukocyte and platelet activation and causes increased lipid peroxidation and increased adhesion and inflammatory molecules. And if the patient is already genetically predisposed for cardiovascular risk factors, then definitely the patient is going to develop atherothrombotic diseases. So the next important health effect that the smoking tobacco has is the cancer. Now we'd like to know what is the exact mechanism that plays a role. The cigarette smoking contains a lot of carcinogens, and this leads to metabolic activation. And because of this metabolic activation, a lot of DNA adducts are formed. These are nothing but the DNA segments which get attached to the cancer containing chemical. So what happens as a result of activation, there is a body's immune mechanism which tries to play a role, and it tries to detoxify this particular activation mechanism. But however, if the activation mechanism supersedes that of detoxification, it leads to persistence of these DNA adducts. Also, there could be mutation in the RAS and TP53 gene, which can lead to loss of normal growth control mechanisms. Now, these DNA adducts also try to get repaired by the normal repair mechanisms, but if there is a failure of these mechanisms to play a role, then again these DNA adducts will persist. Now, there is also activation of the PKA and AKT, that is protein kinase A, because of the binding of nicotinic receptors, and because of this there is a decrease in apoptosis and increase in angiogenesis. So all these together will lead to increased carcinogenicity, and there is formation of cancer in these patients. The next important health effect is the chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So here what happens is the cigarette smoke contains oxidants, and these oxidants will cause activation of the alveolar macrophages, which will release these chemotactic factors like the leukotriene B4 and interleukin 8. And this is mainly by the activation of neutrophils. And this in turn leads to the release of proteases, which will cause destruction of the alveolar wall and breakdown of the alveolar tissues and leading to emphysema. And there is also a hypermucus secretion leading to chronic bronchitis. So as I told you, it is not only the active smoke which is harmful, but there is also some amount of side stream smoke which leads to the second-hand smoke or the passive smoking. Now, this is also called as the environmental tobacco smoke or involuntary smoke. And smoke exposure leads to 0.6 million deaths annually and 1% of global disease around the world. And usually 40% of the children are exposed to secondhand smoke and 36% in utero. In the adults, 38% are exposed to secondhand smoke at home, whereas 30.2% are exposed at their workplace and 7.4% at various restaurants or outside. So if we try to look at the characteristics of the secondhand smoke, the main source is the cigarette smoke, and only 15% of the smoke from a cigarette is inhaled by the smoker, as I told you. And even after the smoke is gone, some amount of toxic residues will start remaining on the articles which are present in that particular area. And children may absorb these toxins, leading to third-hand smoke as well. Now, the most harmful one is the side stream smoke, because it has twice as much nicotine and carbon monoxide and 15 times more formaldehyde than the mainstream smoke. And overall, if you try to see, side stream smoke is 3 times more toxic than the mainstream smoke. So if we try to look at the various mechanisms that lead to the secondhand smoke, is increased oxidized low density lipoprotein cholesterol, increase in the platelet adherence, mitochondrial damage and oxidative damage. There is also damage of the endothelial cells of the coronary arteries, and finally it results in interference with the production of nitric oxide. So moving on to the health effects of the secondhand smoke, in the infants it causes ear and respiratory infections, asthma and sudden infant death syndrome. It causes lung cancer, stroke, tuberculosis and asthma in the adults. And in pregnant women, it causes low birth weight babies, preterm deliveries and congenital defects. So this is a very interesting paper which I came across. This was published in PLOS One in the year 2015. Here they have tried to look at the various health effects of passive smoking. Why this study is so important is because it has compiled the data of 16 systematic reviews and 450 observational studies. So in this particular study, they have seen that the infections which are more prevalent in smokers, especially the passive smokers, are the lower respiratory tract infections in infancy, middle-ear infections, allergic diseases, asthma, and meningococcal diseases in children, lung and cervical cancers, and carriage of N meningitis and streptococcus pneumoniae. So moving on to the health effects of tobacco on the oral cavity. Whether it is the smoked or the smokeless forms, we do see certain changes in the oral mucosa as well as the hard tissue structures of the teeth. So first, let us look at the various changes that occur in the oral mucosa. The first lesion is tobacco pouch keratosis. These are nothing but keratotic changes that can be seen in the oral mucosa, especially in the areas where the tobacco is placed, either in the form of a quid or the tobacco which is directly placed in these areas. And we can see a wrinkling of the mucosa, and it is an area which is usually white, and it can be mixed with red areas. Now, this is an interesting lesion where it resembles lichen planus. Now, oral lichen planus is a potentially malignant disorder, and this particular lesion has a close resemblance to lichen planus. Here also we do see radiating white striae. However, these striae do not crisscross with each other like what we see in lichen planus. And moreover, lichen planus is usually a bilateral lesion, whereas here we can see it usually in a unilateral location. Wherever the placement of the quid is, those areas we tend to see, especially the buccal mucosa and the corner of the mouth. The next lesion that we need to know is smoker's melanosis. As we can see here in the attached gingiva, we can see coalescing macules which are present, and these macules are prominent in those who are chronic smokers. And this is mainly because of the activation of melanocytes, which leads to the deposition of melanin, especially in the basal layer of the epithelium and the superficial lamina propria. Yet another lesion which is caused by the use of smoking is nicotinic stomatitis or smoker's palate. As you can see in the first picture, we can see numerous red dots which are there on the palate. It is usually seen posterior to the rugae area, and it is mainly because of the minor salivary glands which are present, and they get obliterated, and because of that you can observe these erythematous red dots. Another lesion which can be noted in especially patients who have this reverse smoking habit is the palatal changes, which can be appreciated. They can be in the form of keratosis, or they can be elevated 1 to 3 millimeter diameter white lesions, or they can exist in the form of white patches or erythematous areas. They can also be presented as ulcers in the palate, or they can even show as non-pigmented lesions. Leukoplakia is a potentially malignant disorder. It has very high chances of transforming into malignancy. Therefore, we need to have a close view on this particular lesion. Now, leukoplakia is usually occurs in the buccal mucosa, but it can occur anywhere in the oral cavity, and it is usually seen as a predominantly white lesion which is non-scrapable. It can exist in homogeneous and non-homogeneous forms. When you see some mixed red and white lesions, it is referred to as the speckled type, and if you see it as polypoid overgrowths, then it is the nodular type, and it can also exist as verrucous or wrinkled corrugated surface when it is the exophytic type. Now, these lesions, since they have up to 17% of a malignant transformation rate, we need to do a biopsy and look for any dysplastic changes that exist in the microscopy, so that we can treat these patients early and prevent, advise the patients to stop the habit so that they do not progress into any malignant changes. Yet another form of leukoplakia, which is usually multifocal in location and also has high chances of malignant transformation, is proliferative verrucous leukoplakia, which occurs as whitish plaques and corrugated areas on the buccal mucosa or labial mucosa and in the sulcus region. Leukedema is yet another white lesion which can be appreciated in the buccal mucosa. Now, the characteristic feature here is when the mucosa is stretched, it tends to disappear, and therefore you can diagnose this particular lesion. And even histopathologically, we see a lot of intracellular edema which is prevalent in these patients. So all these are mainly seen in the tobacco users. This is again a lesion which is usually seen in chronic tobacco users, and this is called as black hairy tongue. Here we do see hypertrophy of the filiform papillae which are present on the dorsal surface of the tongue, and these filiform papillae, they actually show slowing of desquamation, and therefore they appear on the tongue. To summarize the mucosal lesions which are associated with tobacco use, we have the black hairy tongue. As I told you, they are because of the hyperplasia of the palate and slow desquamation. Nicotinic stomatitis, this is mainly because of the thermal injury which is caused by the smoke, the cigarette or the smoke. And the palatal erosions again seen in heavy smokers. Leukoplakia is mainly because of the combustion products associated with the cigarettes and cigars. And what we need to know is in those patients or those people who keep their cigarettes or the cigars in their mouth and leave it for lengthy periods, then they do cause burns and keratotic changes in the lips. So moving on to little more severe lesions are the verrucous carcinoma and oral squamous cell carcinoma, that is oral cancer. Now, verrucous carcinoma is seen as both exophytic and an endophytic lesion, and it is considered as a forerunner of oral cancer. Now, both the smoked and the smokeless forms of tobacco can lead to oral cancer. Usually, the smoked form causes oral cancer, especially in the areas of the tongue, the floor of the mouth, and the hypopharynx. Whereas if it is the smokeless form, that is the chewing tobacco, mainly causes carcinoma of the retromolar trigone and the gingival-buccal sulcus. This is seen in more than 80% of the cancers of the oral cavity. So here I found a systematic review and meta-analysis of the association of smokeless tobacco and of betel quid without tobacco with the incidence of oral cancer in South Asia and the Pacific. And what we need to know is smokeless tobacco not otherwise specified and betel quid without tobacco are considered as risk factors for oral cancer in Asia and the Pacific. This is the most important finding of their study. And they also said that the confounding factors could be smoking and alcohol in these patients. This is yet another article where they are trying to look at the various carcinogenic pathways that are involved with the use of tobacco and resulting in oral squamous cell carcinoma. And here they have told that it is mainly because of the epigenetic alterations of the oral epithelial cells, inhibition of the multiple systemic immune functions like the interleukins 2 and 4. And there is also a lot of alterations in the oxidative stress leading to DNA damage. And there is a role played by viruses, especially the Epstein-Barr virus and the herpes human papilloma virus. Here again, an interesting article where they have looked at the prevalence of oromucosal lesions, especially in a Western Maharashtrian population. And here they have found that the most prevalent lesion is the tobacco pouch keratosis. Here they have analyzed 687 cases, out of which they found 35% to have tobacco pouch keratosis, and 63% showed smoker's melanosis. 61% had leukoplegia, which is a potentially malignant disorder. Leukemia was found in 10% of the cases. And tobacco-induced keratosis and tobacco-induced oral pigmentation was noted in 7 to 9% of the cases. And oral squamous cell carcinoma was seen in 21 cases out of 687. This is yet another article where they have looked at only the prevalence of oral potentially malignant lesions and conditions in Aurangabad. And here they have found leukoplegia to have the highest percentage of 41.6%, followed by keratosis in 24.8% of the cases. We have now finished with the changes that are associated with the mucosal lesions. So we move on to the changes that are associated with the hard tissue structures of the teeth. So the most common lesion that we can find is discoloration of the teeth. Now, this is mainly because of the leaching out of the tobacco products onto the tooth structure. And whether it is smokeless or the smoked form of tobacco, we do see discoloration of the teeth. Apart from discoloration, we also note a lot of abrasion of the teeth, which can be noted, attrition and abrasion of the teeth. And also there is a severe destruction of the periodontal structures leading to gingival recession and periodontitis in these patients. Now, this is a very recent article where they have tried to analyze the chemical deposits on the tooth enamel exposed to total particulate matter from cigarette smoke and tobacco heating system by novel gas chromatography and mass spectrometry. And here what they found is there is no association between nicotine and tooth discoloration. This is a very important finding that they got. And they found various compounds which they identified in this particular study, out of which 8 were terpenoids that mostly were associated with the degradation products of tobacco constituents, the tobacco flavors, or the heat that was generated by the plant material. So as I told you, it is even the surrounding structures of the teeth, that is the periodontium, is also severely affected in patients who do smoke or who use smokeless tobacco forms. So one of the conditions is acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. Now this is mainly caused by the tar and the calculus deposits which occur on the teeth, along with ischemia that results because of the nicotine producing vasoconstriction of the blood vessels. So this particular lesion mainly affects the marginal gingiva, where you can see erythematous the punched out lesions which can be seen in the marginal gingiva. So this is an interesting systematic review where they have tried to see the effect of tobacco on the periodontal diseases. So the important findings of this particular systematic review, what I found was it has the effect of tobacco on the periodontal cells. So nicotine, or some of the studies have said that nicotine alters the periodontal cells by directly affecting the nicotinic, that is acetylcholine receptors. And cigarette smoking reduces the proliferation rate and retarded migration capabilities of the periodontal ligament stem cells. The study also showed that tobacco increases the bacterial invasiveness, and it also reduces the periodontal tissue immunity. Nicotine causes vascular endothelial cells to contract, reducing the blood flow, that is ischemia, and reducing the immune cells and GCF. And it also has an effect on the inflammatory cells. It mainly exacerbates the inflammatory response. And we can note that the matrix metalloproteinases, which are the degrading enzymes, cause destruction of the periodontal tissue, and as well as the extracellular matrix components like collagen, gel, and elastin. So to summarize the various changes that occur in the dental and the gingival conditions, we have discoloration of the teeth, which occurs mainly because of the combustion byproduct. There is severe abrasion of the teeth, whether it is the smokeless tobacco, which mainly affects the posterior teeth, that is the occlusal aspects of the posterior teeth, whereas abrasion can also be noted in chronic pipe smokers, where it is localized to a particular area. And the gingival conditions mainly are the anug smokers melanosis, association of gingivitis and periodontitis. Usually it is mainly because of the presence of ischemia in these cases. So the last lesion that I would like to discuss is the effect of smoking on dental caries. This is actually in the earlier literature. It says that those who are chronic tobacco chewers have less dental caries. However, we do see a lot of studies wherein this is one of the recent studies, 2018, and they say that nicotine is a risk factor for smoking-induced dental caries, and nicotine promotes the attachment of Streptococcus mutans to the dental surface and increases the incidence and severity of dental caries. This is another study which again supports the correlation between tobacco smoking and increased risk of dental caries. So with this, I would like to conclude that although the National Family Health Survey 4 and the Global Adult Tobacco Survey 2 has shown relative reduction in the use of tobacco, India still has the highest number of consumers and the burden of tobacco-related diseases, especially those who use both, that is smoking and the smokeless forms, are at much higher health risks than those who consume individual tobacco product. And these tobacco products they expose the consumers to high levels of carcinogens, and these are the established causes of human cancers. And it mainly tobacco smoke impairs the mucosal immunity, and we have seen how the pathophysiology of various diseases occur. And nicotine is the main alkaloid which is responsible for the addiction to these smokeless tobacco products. Therefore, any public health strategy should try to control the use of tobacco products, and that should be the main aim of tobacco control. These are my references. So I would like to conclude by saying this famous quote: "He who cures a disease may be the skillfulest, but he that prevents it is the safest physician." Therefore, it is always better. Prevention is always better than cure. So with this, I would like to end my presentation and like to thank all the audience for their patient hearing, and I would like to especially thank Professor Gopala Kovali and Professor Pavitran for having given me an opportunity to speak at this forum. I also thank our Dean, Dr. B.V. Srinivasmurthy sir, and our Vice Chancellor and Pro Vice Chancellors for giving me and for encouraging me and supporting me in presenting this particular presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Soumya. So that was indeed a good take-home message that prevention is better than cure. Thank you, Dr. Soumya, for highlighting and emphasizing the effects of tobacco on health. It was indeed a comprehensive presentation encompassing epidemiology, forms of tobacco, oral lesions, and the effect on general health as well. I hope even those who consume very little amounts of tobacco will feel highly motivated to quit after attending this lecture, which we are going to compile and have it on our official YouTube channel of Ramaiah University very soon. In fact, the entire webinar will be available for those who couldn't log in today and the general public as well. So kindly accept this certificate of appreciation.
Thank you, Dominic.
So our next segment, that is a motivational talk by an oral cancer patient, is rescheduled for the month of June, as June is officially the Cancer Survivors Month. Dear colleagues, it is now time to move on to an interesting segment of today's webinar. So this segment will dwell upon the means of intervention through effective smoking cessation protocols. The interns from the Faculty of Dental Sciences, Ramaiah University of Applied Sciences, that is Dr. Dia Jayant, Dr. Anisha Fernandez, and Dr. Kashish Tak, represent the youth of our country. They will now present their brief overview followed by an innovative video. So please sit back and wait for the video after this presentation. Over to you, Dr. Dia, Dr. Anisha, and Dr. Kashish.
Thank you, sir, for giving us this opportunity. Good evening to one and all present here. Today, I, Dr. Dia, and my co-presenter, Dr. Anisha Fernandez, are going to talk about smoking cessation as well as its benefits. This is the overview of our presentation. Now, coming to the health benefits of quitting smoking, just 20 minutes after the last cigarette, the blood pressure and the pulse drops to the normal rate. The temperature of the hands and the feet increases, and 8 hours after the last cigarette, carbon monoxide levels in the blood drops to normal. The oxygen levels in the blood goes up in concentration, and 24 hours later, the chances of a heart attack starts decreasing rapidly. 40 to 48 hours later, nerve ending starts to regenerate, the taste as well as the smell starts increasing again. Two weeks to 3 months later, circulation as well as lung function improves by 30%. 1 month to 9 months later, coughing, shortness of breath decreases significantly, and the cilia starts to regenerate in the lungs, which helps in clearing out the mucus and decreasing any infection that's present. 1 year later, the risk of a coronary artery disease reduces by half of that of a smoker. And 5 years later, the lung cancer death rate decreases by 50%. The risk of a stroke becomes as good as a non-smoker, and the risk of cancer of the mouth as well as the throat decreases significantly. Now, coming to the smoking cessation program, we have to understand that India has about 275 million current tobacco users. Majority of them use smokeless tobacco, that's around 164 million, and 42 million of them use both the forms of tobacco. An estimated of 1 million people die every single year due to tobacco-related diseases. Hence, it becomes extremely important for us to reduce tobacco-related morbidity as well as mortality by using a combination strategy to avoid initiation among the non-users as well as cessation among the current users. Coming to the essential components of the program, these must be included to maximize the success of any program to reduce the use of tobacco. These components include public educational efforts, community-based programs, helping a smoker quit, school-based programs, enforcements, monitoring and evaluation, and related policy efforts. Guidelines of cessation. These include the 5 Ps ask, advise, assess, assist, and arrange. Coming to the first step of the program, we ask the patient the status of tobacco use and we record it at every given visit. We also ask the patient open-ended questions to get a better insight regarding their habits. We ask patients questions such as, what are the most challenging barriers that they face? And in return, we provide the patient with a personalized feedback and we assess the conviction and the confidence regarding target behaviors in the patient. The second A is advise. We provide personally relevant, specific recommendations for behavior changes. We tell the patients that behavioral issue is as important as any medication that's been provided. Specific documented behavior change advice should be provided in the form of a prescription. The third step is assess. We assess the willingness to quit. If the patient is willing to quit, we offer the patient praise, resources, as well as assistance. And if the patient is not willing to quit, we motivate the patient with the 5 Rs. That's relevance, risk, rewards, roadblocks, as well as repetition. It's extremely important for us to use shared decision-making strategies that include a collaborative goal setting. We help the patient by developing a feasible self-management goal for them. We provide options as well as choices among all the possible self-management goals. We in turn also share our perspective with the patient on what is the most important short-term goal, and we agree on a specific target together. The fourth step is assist. We help the patient by assisting them with a plan to quit the use of tobacco. We use strategies that include action planning as well as problem solving. We help the patient develop strategies to address their barriers to change, and we use planned interactions to support evidence-based care. We also provide care to the patients understanding what fits their cultural background. And during their follow-up visits, we review their progress, their experience, as well as their concerns. Looking at all of this together, we renegotiate their goals and we revise on the action plan together. The final step is arrange, which is extremely important. We help with the action plans as well as referrals. We establish a two-way communication and we partner with community groups to improve the services as well as linkages. We follow up with the patient every week. We restate the entire plan to the patient and we encourage the patient. We also arrange the patient to contact specific community resources that could support their goal. A follow-up with goal set and action plan at each non-acute visit is done. So now I'd like to hand over this presentation to my co-presenter, Dr. Anisha.
Good evening to one and all present here. I'm going to be speaking about the medical intervention related to smoking cessation. Health professionals have a very prominent role to play in tobacco cessation as they are considered trustworthy and they are also viewed as role models. So they could have some kind of an impact on people and their habits. When health professionals are engaged at an individual level, they can mass educate the population on the harmful effects of tobacco and also on the harmful effects of secondhand smoking, also known as passive smoking, and they could help overcome addiction. At the community level, they could be initiators of policy measures, engaging in efforts to promote smoke-free workplaces. At the society level, they could be a part of global tobacco control efforts like increasing taxes on cigarettes, and they can also be involved with certain WHO frameworks related to tobacco policies. Evidence from randomized control trials and observational studies have shown that physicians who intervene with smokers lead to a greater smoking cessation. If physicians are involved with the patient, someone just removed me from the meeting. So if physicians and other healthcare providers facilitate long-term cessation, then about 4 million smokers would become former smokers. And this is mainly because the physician interventions become very intensive with the patient and also the contacts become pretty frequent. There is a prevalence of up to 15% cessation rates compared with 5 to 10% in non-intervention cases. Coming to the medications in tobacco cessation, the most widely known is NRT, which is nicotine replacement therapy. There are various forms like patches, gums, and lozenges, all three of which are over the counter, and nicotine oral inhalers and nasal sprays, both of which are prescription only. Non-nicotine medications include varenicline, which is known as Chantix, and bupropion hydrochloride, which is Zyban, both of which are prescription only. Some of the adverse effects of NRT include headache, dizziness, a rash at the patch site, irritation to the mouth and throat, basically a sore throat, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, etc., all of which are non-threatening. Other treatment options which are non-pharmacological include therapy and support. Under therapy and support, we have behavioral approaches, which again could be individual or group counseling measures. And behavioral approaches include cognitive therapy, mindfulness treatment, supportive groups, and also interviews. Nicotine rehab is usually the last resort and is usually necessary if previous attempts like NRT, counseling, or any kind of behavioral therapy have failed. And rehabs often include long-term follow-ups as it prevents setbacks and relapses. Effective smoking cessation programs provide treatment which is customized for the individual's needs, and this is based on the person's smoking history, that is the form of tobacco, the number of cigarettes per day, how long he's been smoking for, and also the degree of addiction level. E-cigarettes are not considered as an alternative to tobacco smoking, and that is because it is known that e-cigarettes have similar adverse effects just like tobacco smoking, and this is seen over a short period of time. Coming to the statistical efficacy of the above mentioned treatments, it is very clear that in an unassisted case, that is in a patient who is not under NRT or behavioral therapy, the cessation of efficacy of the treatment is basically just 2.8%. Behavioral only, which is cognitive or supportive therapy, is about 16.1%. NRT only is 12.3%, and NRT and behavioral is about 17.4% effective. Prescription only, which includes Zyban and Chantix, stands at 15.3%, and the highest in this group is a combination of prescription and behavioral, which stands at 20.4%. Coming to the benefits of NRT, there are increased success rates of quitting, about 50 to 70%, which are not seen in patients who are not under NRT. It is safe, that is, it provides the person with clean nicotine instead of dirty nicotine with 4,000 plus chemicals. What this means is that when a person is smoking a cigarette, apart from nicotine, which is the addictive substance, he's also getting other forms of really harmful carcinogens, hydrogen cyanide, forms of acids, etc., which are extremely harmful to the body. But in NRT, the patient is only receiving a small concentrated dose of nicotine, which is not adjunct with any other chemicals. It's solely just nicotine. NRT reduces withdrawal feelings by giving small amounts of controlled nicotine. This basically works because of the release of dopamine. Benefits outweigh the risks, even in smokers with cardiovascular disease, and it has been shown that any cardiovascular patient who is under NRT do not have any increased incidence of an attack or an infarction. A combination of NRT and bupropion taken over long periods of time are much safer than cigarette smoking. All forms of NRT are equally effective in smoking cessation. I would like to conclude by saying that tobacco smoking is the most preventable cause of morbidity and mortality. Quitting tobacco is extremely beneficial to the body in various ways, as mentioned by Dia. A combination of NRT and Zyban with therapy is proven to be the most effective, as we've seen it stands at about 20.4%. There is no cigarette that has been approved by FDA as a method of tobacco cessation, since it is known to have similar physiological effects just like cigarette smoking. NRT may be associated with side effects, but they are non-threatening, and they in fact help in quitting tobacco. Varenicline helped in smoking cessation in smokers who were unable to quit the habit within 3 months of beginning any form of therapy, which can include NRT or behavioral. And the first step towards quitting is the willingness to quit. We would like to express our appreciation to our Dean, Dr. B.V. Srinivasa Murthy. We would also like to thank the Department of Oral Pathology and Microbiology, Ramaya University of Applied Sciences, and Professor Gopala Kovali for giving us an opportunity to be a part of this conference. These are our references. Thank you for your kind attention. We now have a short video to present in order to spread awareness, which is based on our theme, Commit to Quit Tobacco.
Started innocently. It looked fun, it looked cool. But then I got hooked. And it had its downsides. I couldn't keep up physically. It started to put a strain on my life and the lives of my loved ones. Then I got sick, really sick, and I realized I was losing. But I knew what I had to do. Quitters are winners.
Thank you so much. I would like to conclude this presentation saying quitters are winners. And thank you to all the organizations for giving us this lovely opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Dia, Dr. Anisha, and Dr. Kashish for your presentation emphasizing the details about smoking cessation. Indeed, very helpful for someone looking to quit tobacco consumption. The video message was loud and clear, and in one line with the theme of the conference, that is, light a lamp of enlightenment, not a cigar of disease. Within a short duration, the video reiterated the destructive cascade that would unfold if one embraces tobacco consumption. These motivational videos indeed push individuals to commit to quit tobacco. Thank you once again. We will now move on to our next segment, which is the announcement of awards. So I know several undergraduate and postgraduate students have been waiting for this. It's time to know the names of the winners and who's taking home exciting prizes. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to once again thank all the participants of the essay writing competition and the artwork competition. We received an overwhelming response from over 50 institutions in India, making it a very tough job for the judges. I now request Dr. Vanishri to announce the names of the prize winners.
Thank you, Dr. Dominic. Good evening and good afternoon to one and all present in the webinar. Can you see the screen of mine?
Yes, it's visible, Dr. Vanishri.
Thank you. It has been proven that the recognition of one's effort is more highly valued than anything else. I, Dr. Vanishri, on behalf of organizing committee, heartily welcome you all for the award ceremony, the most awaited part of today's program. It is a matter of great honor and pleasure to appreciate and reward the hard work of all the participants who have made this event more special. Now it's time to acknowledge the young talents and creativity of the participants for the events conducted on the occasion of World's No Tobacco 2021.
Yeah, Dr. Vanishri, I request you to go to full screen mode, please.
It is on screen, it's on full screen mode only.
Yeah, can you just go to view and then come back to full screen? Just undo and redo once again for clarity. Yeah.
Okay. So is it visible? Dr. Dominic?
Oh, Anishri, I think we cannot see the screen. It is blank.
No, I can see, but it's not in the full mode. That's okay. We can move on.
Okay.
Dr. Dominic, we can move on. No problem.
Yes, we can see now, Anishri. Please move on.
Okay. Sorry for the interruption. Out of 120 plus registrations received for each event, we have got 10 best artworks and 10 best essays, which are as follows. For the first event, that is essay competition winners, under the category 1, we have got a first place for Dr. Manan Arora, the Manipal College of Dental Sciences, Manipal. The second place is secured by 2 people, that is Dr. Annie John, the Manipal College of Dental Sciences, Manipal, and Dr. Pallavi Goyal, PS Dental College, Bangalore. And again, third place has been secured by 2 people, that is Dr. Tushata V, VSPM Dental College, Nagpur, and the third place, Jaisuman K, the School of Social Sciences, Ruas, Bangalore. And the consolation prizes for The category 1 prize is Dr. Abra Roy, KLVK Institute of Dental Sciences, Belgaum, and Dr. Disha Kumar, A.B. Shetty Memorial Institute of Dental Sciences, Mangalore. Under the category 2 for the essay competition, the first prize is secured by Miss Shivani S. Tripati, Bapuji Dental College and Hospital, Davangere. And again, second prize is secured by two people, that is Miss Ashita K. Singh from Bharati Vidyapeeth Dental College, Pune, and Miss Roshani Raghavan, D.Y. Patel Dental College, again Pune. Again, third prize is secured by two people, that is Miss Niharika from Sibar Institute of Dental Science, Guntur, and Miss Anjali Singh, Faculty of Dental Sciences, Ruas, Bangalore. The consolation prize is secured by Miss Rashi Kare from Babu Banarasi Das College of Dental Sciences, Lucknow. Next event was artwork or the drawing or the painting related to No Tobacco Day, which is the winners are in the category 1. The first prize is secured by Dr. Ratipriya A. Vinayaka Mission, Sankarashara Dental College, Salem. Second prize, Dr. Arti R. Indira Gandhi Institute of Dental Sciences, Pondicherry. And third prize is secured by Atira Rajesh, SRM Dental College, Chennai. And the consolation prize under the category 1 is secured by Dr. Surabhi Juneja, Sharad Pawar Dental College, Maharashtra. Under the category 2, the first prize is secured by Dr. Kiran Sudham Chavan, the SMPT Dental College, Maharashtra. Second prize is secured by Dr. Harshini Salokumar, Shri Venkateshwara Dental College, Pondicherry. The third prize is secured by Dr. Ashita Sadar, Faculty of Dental Sciences, Ruas, Bangalore. And under the category 3, we have 4 prizes. That is, under first prize, Miss Sabina Singh, SRM Dental College, Chennai. And second prize again goes to SRM Dental College, Chennai. That is Miss Kirtana K. And second prize, who was again shared, is by Miss Suruti, Sri Venkateshwara Dental College, Pondicherry. And third prize is secured by Miss Rupal Ramdas Patil from D.Y. Patil Dental College, Pune. And the consolation prize under the category 3 is secured by two people, that is Miss Aditi Nanda, Baba Jaswant Dental College, Punjab, and Mr. Ekansh Kumar, Faculty of Dental Sciences, Ruas, Bangalore. And to next to COVID, there are few paintings or the drawings which are chosen as the best 10 among all the 120 plus registrations, and these are the prize winners. The first place under the category 1 is secured by Ratipriya, which as I told you. So these are the paintings. Under the category 1 for third place and the consolation prize. Under the category 2, the first place and the second place. Category 2, third place by Dr. Ashpriya Sadar. Under the category 3, that is the first place is secured by Miss Sabina Singh, which you can see on the left, and the second place by Miss Kirtana. These are again under the category 3 by Miss Shruti, that is second place winner, and the Rupal Ramdas Patil for third place. And the last one for the consolation prize is by Aditi Nanda and Mr. Ekansh. These were the best and top 10 drawings or the paintings which was chosen for the today's competition. I congratulate all the winners and all the participants for this event, and as told, quitters are the winners on this occasion of World No Tobacco Day. I thank Professor Gopal Somali, Dr. Professor K. Pavitran, and Dr. Soumya for giving me an opportunity to announce the prize winners and be a part of this webinar. Thank you once again, sir. I now request Dr. Dominic to move on to the next presentations by the essay competition winners. Over to you, Dr. Dominic.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Vanishri, for announcing the prize winners. So to make this webinar unique, we thought of inviting the prize winners of the essay competition to share their thoughts about the topic chosen by them and their content through which they expressed themselves. So first of all, I would like to invite Dr. Manan Arora, postgraduate student from Manipal College of Dental Sciences, to read out his essay and share his views. You can unmute yourself and come on video, Dr. Manan.
Yes, sir. Am I visible?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Dominic and Dr. Vanishri. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Manan Arora, and I hope you're having a tobacco-free day. I want to thank the foundation and the organizers for choosing my essay and thus giving me the honor to speak at such a great event. I'm so humbled that they liked what I wrote and they're giving me a chance to share it with the world. What I'm about to share with you is a story I wrote about a very close friend who I feel very strongly about. I hope you like it as much as I loved writing it. This will be my 6th year in Manipal, a small town geographically located in the Udupi district of Karnataka, but a place so dynamically out of this world, it wouldn't leave you the way you came in. It changes your mind and body in ways you didn't even know they could. It gives you the best of friends, the rarest of opportunities, great sunsets to calm your nerves, and what I like to believe, the best ginger tea in the world. I'm a student in the dental college in this town of dreams, considering the dream city position is already occupied by Bombay. And I can solemnly swear that I have never smoked a cigarette in 25 years of my life. Hard to swallow? I bet. Because believe it or not, 8 out of every 10 students in my batch smoke cigarettes on a regular basis. On being asked if they are planning to quit, most of them end up saying that this is their last day. The last day? This will be my 6th year in Manipal waiting for the last day to arrive. My last day. Sorry I lied about never having smoked a cigarette before. I was afraid you'd judge me. But please believe me now when I say tomorrow will be my last day. Yes, I'm an addict. There, I said it. Phew. Feels like a weight off my chest. It all started 4 years back on a Saturday night in a club where my friends and I were enjoying the infamous nightlife of this town. Yes, you guessed it right. My story starts in the same cliched way we've seen in movies multiple times, where a bunch of boys are grooving to a Punjabi song on the dance floor of a posh club, and everyone is obsessed with this one guy in the perfect clothes and leather shoes and a cigarette in his hand. That was my friend, my best friend. We drank, we danced, and we drank again. I was feeling nauseous, so I went out to get some air. He came looking for me after 5 minutes. Yeah, so typical, right? I still wasn't feeling better, so he offered me a puff out of his smoke and said, this might help. At that moment, I didn't think twice. Hell, I didn't think at all. Anything to stop my head from spinning, right? So I snatched the white stick of death from his hand, which I remember felt oddly soft and harmless. Not his hand, the cigarette. I held it between my fingers, surprised at how naturally effortless it was, as if I had done it 100 times. And I took the first puff of my life. I knew instantly it was a mistake. Not morally, but physically, because I heard my stomach churn and I threw up a bucketful in the middle of the terrace where everyone stood still watching the downfall. Wow, so much for a whiff of fresh air. I don't remember the next day or the days after that, and I've lost count of how many cigs I've smoked since. Now that I come to think of it, I've lost count of so many things in my life. But hey, who's counting? It's not as if I've never tried to quit in the last 4 years, but somehow I never stuck to it. Until the day I met him. This senior of mine, who I had seen around at multiple house parties, came to me one day and offered me a smoke. After I took him on his offer, he sat next to me and asked me the last question one would expect to be asked in a situation like that. He said, "Why do you smoke?" And don't tell me because life is an anxious mess and there's too much stress, because I can tell you 100 other ways to work on that. Tell me what makes you smoke. To be honest, I was planning on giving that exact answer, so for a moment I was stunned. Then I thought, might as well think of a genuine reason to give to this guy so he can go away and let me enjoy the party. I looked at the cigarette he had given me and started thinking. All this while, he just stood there, waiting for my reply. I took a long time and then some. No matter how hard I tried to think of a genuine witty reason, I could only think of one. And I didn't like that reason at all. I smoke because I can't quit, I said. He took the cigarette from me, crushed it with his average looking non-leather shoe, looked at me with the most honest smile on his face and said, "Is someone stopping you?" He took out and gave me another cigarette from his pocket. He didn't have to say it. I knew what he wanted me to do. 5 months and 10 days ago was my last day. And I write this essay in the hope that maybe reliving my fight against addiction would keep the spark of rebellion alive. One more day, and then another, and another. And maybe this time I do quit for good. All I know is we have to keep trying and remember that the only thing that's stopping us from quitting is us. So if you're reading this and struggling with addiction, trying to combat it as hard as I am for as long as I've been, then I want you to know that you aren't alone. And if you were looking for a sign to start your journey of abstinence, this is it. Let's do it together. Thank you. Well, this was the essay, but I strongly feel that in the modern society where information is so readily available, what we are really fighting against is the addiction and not the ignorance towards the harmful effects of tobacco. And the only way we can fight it is by standing up against it together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Manan. Indeed, deserving first place for this true story, I'd rather say. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
I now invite Dr. Annie John, postgraduate student from Manipal College of Dental Sciences, to share her thoughts briefly.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, Dr. Annie, you can share your thoughts briefly.
Yes. Very good evening to one and all present. I'm Dr. Annie John, and I'm pursuing my post-graduation in Manipal College of Dental Sciences, Manipal. So today, in today's fast-paced world, as we are running and racing ahead to beat time, there is a realm of events around us that is affecting us. Things that are pulling us back and preventing us from progressing forward. Things that are affecting our health. As we age, there is physiological and psychological changes that happen, and they affect us. But are some of our habits hastening this process? Are some of the habits of the people around us quickening this process? It is at this point that I sat down and thought about smoking and its effects on the mind and the body. We need to make a conscious decision to prevent this and protect our upcoming youth from the clutches of this monster called smoking. Now, as we all know, we as humans are owners of a very inquisitive brain. We seek to find the why of everything. We all know that smoking is injurious to health. It is an established fact. But the why to it and how it affects our mind and body is what was covered in my essay. So discussing very briefly, I'll just touch on a few points. Most of it was already covered, but tobacco, it is a plant. The leaves are dried, sold in various forms. Nicotine is the major content. Once that enters our body, that enters our bloodstream, it can have mainly two effects. It can either stimulate the adrenal gland to secrete epinephrine, which is our body's fight and flight response hormone. So the heart rate increases, the blood pressure increases, and our brain is stimulated to secrete dopamine. Dopamine is the happy hormone. So then what is the problem? Like once we take a puff, nicotine is secreted, dopamine is secreted, we are happy. The problem lies in when there's a continuous stimulation of the brain by nicotine to stimulate the production of dopamine, then our brain shuts off or it stops the production of dopamine by its innate mechanism. So this becomes a perpetual cycle, and this is how people get addicted to nicotine. The second effect that nicotine causes is it causes damage of the arterial walls, it causes atherosclerosis, constriction of the blood vessels, and it might lead to many serious damaging cardiovascular effects. Tobacco also has severe effects on the respiratory system and all other parts of the body. Other components of cigarette like hydrogen cyanide, carbon monoxide, arsenic, etc. will affect our neuronal system, and it causes cognitive impairment. As a dentist, the effect of tobacco on oral health is immense. So we as dentists see that in smokers, mainly we observe periodontitis. So there's an aggressive progression of the disease because of impairment of healing, alteration of the microbial flora, etc. So we usually see young adults who have loss of teeth at an early age. So this in turn affects their self-morale, self-confidence, etc. So we can stop this at an earlier point. This needn't be allowed to progress so fast. So stopping smoking cannot happen one fine morning. Like my colleague had said, it takes time, it takes the willpower, and it takes support. So we need to give ourselves the power to protect our body. And nowadays, psychologists are suggesting a motivational interview in which the patient is encouraged to reflect and self-evaluate about why he wants to stop smoking. The youth of today, the citizens of tomorrow, have the power within their own hands. And as rightly justified by the theme of today's program, the lamp of enlightenment should be burning and not the cigar of disease. Thank you. I take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this webinar for giving me a platform to share my views. I would also like to thank my college, my dean, Dr. Kirtilata M. Pai, the associate dean, Dr. Vidya Saraswati, my head of the department, Dr. Pradeep, and all my faculty and colleagues for their support and guidance. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Annie. That was fantastic to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I now invite Ms. Shivani Japati from Bapuji Dental College to just briefly share her views. Dr. Shivani?
Give me an opportunity to and as during my history I recently found out a lot about this, and basically what inspired me to choose the topic are vaping and e-cigarettes a solution to tobacco is the age-old contrast between the abuse of nicotine and its modern solutions that recently came up like vapes and e-cigarettes. These are basically sugar-coated as treatments for nicotine addiction, but are in reality more of abused than or of use currently. And the lack of advertisements, innovative advertisements that are required to counteract the popular and the coolness of the tobacco smoking is a very big gap. The easy targets that fall are teens and kids, mostly because they are naive and innocent to the adverse effects of tobacco, and they have a fresh perspective in life that they require to spend their energy on to get a sense of adventure by using these products. But little do they know the adverse effects and the harmful reactions to their simply naive decisions. I read I'm sorry if I'm stuttering, it's because my first time. It all started when I read few articles that told me the experience of people who tried very hard to quit. And most I came to know was these people started smoking in their teens just in a very typical fashion and continued it in their adults that got very ugly with time. A person I came to know about had quit smoking 30 years prior, but is still struggling and trying to win the tough battle of resisting the addiction every day, even till now. He is in his 40s or 50s, and that's a very sad reality we have to face. The anti-tobacco substance are often misunderstood, I think. It's because as a teen myself, I come to know of so many nicotine patch memes that depict that they don't work or they are not really effective, but it rises because of the ignorance of its actual use. They are not used to give the kick, the feel that the nicotine usually gives, but it is to just resist the withdrawal symptoms that you feel while you're addicted to it.
Okay.
Yeah. This is to be highlighted and this is to be more understood on and worked upon as an anti-tobacco industry should. And The main gap that lies is in the depiction of the infomercials to counteract the tobacco use. That is by often we see that anti-tobacco commercials, usually in movies, in advertisements, are shown in a single line. Smoking causes cancer and smoking kills. More than that, we can see the ugly truth of the tumors and the face deformation that occurs after surgeries. That is because of tobacco use. While the main intention of these advertisements is to instill fear and then abandon people from using tobacco, I think it doesn't really address the original issue here. And the original issue being here is addiction. People want to quit, but they cannot quit. It's because of their lack of willpower, all the mind games that nicotine plays with them. It gets pretty ugly. And also the depiction, especially by Bollywood movies and all over the world, as smoking relieves stress, and it is something that people go to when they are under a lot of stress or are very hurt or pain. This depiction in overall view has to change, and where the other and healthier alternatives have to become cooler and more popular, like taking a walk or spending time in nature or meditation. These are the long ones that won't have side effects on and are basically progressive. This is a big gap that's already present, and maybe it's even increasing day by day. This has to be addressed primarily to win our battle from nicotine addiction. And so I conclude this in my essay that while there's this big gap, there's also a lot of requirement of personal touch along with a person who's addicted and who's having the sense of chainness with him. This is the primary conclusion that I arrive at. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shivani. Thank you for your thoughts. So we wish you all the best.
Thank you, sir.
So it's so nice to see the youth of our country have such strong awareness against the consumption of tobacco. They are the best ambassadors for creating no tobacco awareness in society too. As she rightly said, the consumption of tobacco begins at a very early age. So once again, congratulations to the prize winners of both the essay and artwork competitions. Now I request Professor K. Pavitran to give his concluding remarks about the webinar.
Yeah, good evening to you all. It was actually a very wonderful and useful meeting. And as you heard from Dr. Soumya, she elaborated nicely about the health effects of smoking. And few take-home points for all of us are, one is approximately about 8 million people are dying of tobacco-related cancers. And most important thing, or the saddest part, is that more than two-thirds is happening in the low and middle income countries or the developing countries. And it damages nearly every organ of ours. And is one of the leading causes of preventable death. And regarding this COVID times, it is important to see that those who are affected with COVID and those who used to smoke, in them, the disease is severe and also it leads to increased mortality. So that is very important to learn. And flavored tobacco use, the minted one and all, so many flavored tobacco forms are available, and their use is increasing among the adolescents. And as you heard also, e-cigarettes are also harmful. It is not completely safe. And to promote the strategies to end this pandemic, WHO has formulated a policy that is called Empower, that is monitoring the tobacco use, protecting people from tobacco use, offering help to quit, warning dangers of tobacco, enforcing ban, and also raising taxes to prevent or decrease the use of tobacco use. And you heard about the benefits of stopping or quitting tobacco.
the health benefits by Dr. Dia, Anisha, and Kashish. And as you know, there are more than 100 benefits of stopping or quitting tobacco use. So please pledge today, quit tobacco use. And with these few words, I conclude here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Professor Pavitran. Thank you so much, sir, for your guidance. It is now my pleasure to propose the vote of thanks. First and foremost, I would like to thank the directors for today's events, Professor Gopala Kovali, Editor-in-Chief, Journal of Carcinogenesis, the Founder-President of the Carcinogenesis Foundation, Department of Medicine, Division of Gastroenterology, Houston, Texas, for having initiated this idea of conducting a day conference followed by a webinar at an international platform, and giving the Oral Cancer Research Center of Ramaya University to co-host the World No Tobacco Day events and the webinar. I thank Professor K. Pavitran, Professor and Head, Department of Medical Oncology and Hematology, Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences, Kochi, and advisor of the Carcinogenesis Foundation, for his guidance. I'm very grateful to the eminent speakers of today's webinar, Dr. Chris Bostic, Policy Director, Action on Smoking and Health, Washington, D.C., for having accepted our invitation and being here in spite of his busy schedule. Dr. Soumya SV enlightened us about the effects of tobacco on health and updated our knowledge about the global and national concerns at hand. In spite of our administrative commitments, she devoted a lot of time in meticulously planning the events and overseeing its perfect execution. I once again thank the speakers for enriching us with their wonderful lectures. I thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Kuldeep K. Raina, Pro Vice Chancellor, Research, Dr. Govind R. Kadambi, Professor, Dr. D.C. Sundaresh, that is Pro Vice Chancellor, Health Sciences, Professor M. Sai Baba, the Registrar, for encouraging us with their valuable inputs and providing us the motivation that was required. My sincere and special thanks to our Dean, Dr. B.V. Srinivasamurthy, for being a constant source of inspiration and guiding us throughout in conducting these events. I also thank our Associate Deans, Dr. Lata Anandakrishna, Dr. Kavita Prasad, our Academic Registrar, Dr. Lavanya, and all the HODs. I'm grateful to all the Deans and Heads of other specialities and other dental colleges in India who've allowed their undergraduates and postgraduates to participate in this global event, making it successful. My sincere thanks to the students who have participated and making this a successful event. I thank Mr. J. Sudas Anthony, Manager Program Operations, for his timely help and all the technical support. I also thank the ICT department of our university, Mr. Nagesh, Lokesh, Mr. Rakesh, who have ensured smooth sailing. I thank Dr. Vanishri, Dr. Dia, Dr. Anisha, and Dr. Kashish for their contribution. The coordinators, Dr. Dia, Dr. Anisha, did a marvelous job and worked round the clock to coordinate the day events and the webinar, catering to all the needs and queries of the participants. I take this opportunity to sincerely acknowledge their efforts and those by the members of the Oral Cancer Research Center. I'm sure the message, commit to quit tobacco, has reached the community at large. It was indeed my pleasure to be the virtual host for this webinar. We hope to organize many such events in the future with all your support. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you for joining. I now request Professor Gopala Kovali and Dr. Soumya SV to give their final concluding remarks.
Hi, Dominic. Thank you very much for coordinating this event as well as for conducting this webinar today. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Pavitran, for being here all along and helping us up to today and today as well. Soumya, Dr. Soumya, thank you so much for taking the leadership and organizing this. It went very well with you and your team's effort. Congratulations and thanks to all your team members. I think this is the second time we are doing. I think last month we did with the Dr. Soumya team on head and neck cancers. Also went very well. I think what I was envisioning, is coming true in terms of involving the youth in a large scale and allowing them to express themselves and feel empowered. And that's, I think, is lacking so far. I have seen in all conferences that I have organized or I participated within India. I think it's all adults talking and going away and not giving much opportunity and a platform to the youth. I think our mission is partly fulfilled or beginning to be fulfilled with the events that we did today and last month. Thanks to, again, Ramaya Institute faculty, staff team, and my direct contact, Dr. Soumya. So thank you again. So we hope, like Dr. Dominic mentioned, we hope we could do more of this kind of awareness events, and mostly the events that involve and encourage participation from the youth. That's the goal. In fact, a couple of years ago, our organization proposed August as the month of youth against cancer. Probably that would be an appropriate month to celebrate, because several students will be going back to college, and some students will be enjoying the break. So that would be the opportunity to bring more youth more vigorously into to the focus. Hopefully, we could work on that as well. In fact, a couple of years ago, we did an event like similar one we did today with the Delhi University Cancer Center and Medical School, Delhi Medical College. It was very well received. So I think hopefully, and I will reach out to all of you, and hopefully August we can celebrate again in a big way. Thank you again, and have a great day.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure being associated with you and Dr. Pavitran for organizing this particular event. And I hope through this event, actually, there's a lot of participants from the students, interns, as well as the staff. We saw a lot of participation even from the staff. And it was really a very good response from all over the dental colleges. Like it was not just localized to one particular area, but we got participants from all over India, from various dental and medical institutes. So that was the highlight of this particular event, because it was a general topic and it was mainly on no tobacco. So we got a lot of response, and indeed it was the performance by the students and the interns was really great, and even the PGs especially. And and I think this is the first time that we have actually given an opportunity to the students to speak in this forum, and I think it is going to be a very good encouragement for the students to participate in such events henceforth. I thank all of you for being a part of this particular webinar, and we hope to conduct many such programs in the future too, with all your help and support. Thank you, one and all. I think we can close the webinar.
Thank you once again, everyone. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you to the volunteers and interns, which I forgot to mention. I think they did a fabulous job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.